How much does it cost to build, and how much does it weigh? This little camper is almost finished, but it still has a few things that it needs, like heat, a good cooking area, table and chairs, and a couple of modifications. So let's get those done so we can take it on another adventure. My plan is to mount this diesel heater inside this and then port the heat vent out the back and into the front of the camper. This mounting plate would go on normally for a heat shield. I'm still going to use the plate. What you need to cut out is this area here. If you're going against a wood base, you want to cut as much out as you can with still having this plate cover everything. I think I'm just going to use this 4-inch round hole saw. I'm just going to angle it a little bit like that. Run the vent out this end over here. Put this on here. When I pick it up, it'll let me know exactly where I need to cut the hole. Alright. I want to make sure I've got this marked out nice so that I can get all of these in this 4-inch hole. Center's about 3 inches off the bottom of that box. 11 3/4. 11 5/8. So I'll just add an 1/8 inch up. I'm gonna say I want it around this area. Oh, broke my drill bit. That's about right. Good. So this is the wiring harness for that heater. This end plugs into the heater. This goes to the thermostat. This goes to the fuel pump. And then this powers it. Instead of cutting a hole this big around through the camper to feed this in, I'm just gonna cut this off closer to the heater, and then I'll feed it out through the camper through a small hole, run it into this box, and splice it back together with some butt splices. For power, I'm gonna run a 2-conductor down from the battery compartment, down, around, up in, and then splice it also inside. So all my splices will be made inside the box close to the heater, where if I have a problem, I'll be able to splice them again later on, fix the splices. This is what's going to go through the box, and those cords will go in through this cord grip. Thinking I'll mount the fuel tank on the edge of this box. This box is a little narrower than the tongue. Looks like I need an inch and 1/4 spacer. Probably. I couldn't find spacers in town, so I made my own with this plastic. I guess I could have used a pile of washers, but that seemed just a bit wasteful. And this plastic's pretty much indestructible, so it should last a long time. I think it'll work out really well. These tanks have 2 places for the fuel outlet. That way you can have the filler tube on your right side or your left side. So you have to install the fuel line fitting yourself. For this, the easiest way I've found is to use a piece of wire, run it up through the bottom of the hole, out the top of the tank, run it through your fuel fitting, bend a little L on it, and pull it through the tank. I've got the box sitting where I want it. These bars, I think I'm gonna have to either cut them off or cut off the vertical part. The front bar doesn't interfere with anything. The back bar interferes with this mounting hole. I can probably cut just the vertical part of the angle off and then drill a hole through for the mounting hole, leave both bars on, and actually screw it to those bars. Now that this is bolted down, I need to mark out where this vent pipe is going to go through into the camper. Kind of nervous about this cut. Push too hard, this thing's going to jump all over the place. So I'm going to have to go real light. This board is going to fill the gap. I'm going to drill 3 holes down through it. One is going to go through down here. That's going to be the power. One is going to go down through here. That's going to come up and power the fuel pump. And one will go down through here, pop through the wall. That will run the thermostat. All right, that one fits. The other one should have no problem fitting. Power wire. I'm not real excited about cutting these brand new wires, but I think this will work, so I'm going to do it. I think I'm going to keep the thermostat a little bit low so that it's not, reading the temperature at the top of the camper. I find it's much easier to hook up the exhaust intake and fuel lines before mounting this all to the trailer. That way you're not working over your head and all this stuff's right at waist level. Really easy to work on. So my fuel pump, I'm going to go back here, kind of run at an angle like that. So I need to drill a hole here. That should work. Okay, I need to route this up through here. Probably staple it to that or something. See if I can get it all through here. All right. I cut a groove in a piece of wood and then mounted this inline fuse. That's 20 amp. That'll be the fuse for the heater. The reason the heater is on its own fuse instead of running through the fuse block is because it's going to be connected directly to the battery. The fuse block already has 20 amps worth of fuses in it, and the charge controller has a 20 amp output. I don't want to risk blowing the internal fuse in the charge controller. That would probably be a real pain to change while camping. And honestly, I'm not even sure what kind of fuse it takes. It's running. First trial run. Hopefully I'm gonna put it through a real test tonight. Another thing I'm really quite happy about is I haven't had to open this lid, which is pretty cool because I kind of figured I'd have to open this for it to get enough inflow of air, but it seems to have plenty and it's really running just fine with the lid closed. You can see the intake drops down right here, tucks into that frame channel. I got a zip tie there, and then I tie wired that to the edge of the tongue. And then the exhaust drops down, bends around, and this hanger is self-tapered into the tongue. So for the most part, it's all pretty neat. Held up well on my trip. So far, so good. I didn't have a chance to seal around this box before my trip, but fortunately it didn't leak. This is the only way I can see to get a seal around the heat duct, since the box itself blocks getting to the heat duct to seal around it. This is going to be my table. So my table is going to be 26.5 inches wide, and I've noticed these boards have a little bit of a wave to their edges. This seems to be the way they fit together the best. So I'm going to cut this one at 26.5 and this one at 26.5, like that, and these two pieces will be the ones I use. I think I'm going to use these aluminum angles, which they don't stick down too far, and I'll cut this end something like that. That way it's not going to jab anybody. That feels good. So now I have to drill a bunch of holes. This is all glued. These are all little strips glued together. So I'm just going to try to put a screw in every strip. This also needs to be able to pivot and hook to another piece of angle. So I need to cut a round section here so that this doesn't hit the other angle when it folds up and down. I'm just going to clamp these to my rail so I have this spaced pretty equally, because that's about where the bracket's going to land that's going to hold this to the wall. Just start one. I think I'm going to run these in by hand with a screwdriver. That way I have less chance of stripping these first couple out. That seems pretty good. Yeah, that feels good and solid. gonna be tricky. I would just mount the brackets, but I'm afraid if I do that, they may end up too wide one way or the other.
This piece will mount to a couple of hinges and fold out from the wall to hold the table up. Doesn't have to be anything fancy, just something to keep the table nice and flat and stable.
Let's see if this will hold. Yeah. To make sure this thing doesn't fall when I'm using it, if you bump this, tipped it that way, the table could fall. I just drilled a hole, used a 3/8 bolt and a wing nut. So that just pops out, flips to the side, and the table goes down. Then to put it up, all I gotta do, flip it up, flip this out, put my bolt through, roll my wing nut on. I actually hauled it just like that with the table up. Didn't have any problems, it stayed together. So far, everything's worked really well.
The camper already has 2 coats of stain on the siding and trim, but it occurred to me that the deck stain will resist water, but it can still get packed full of road dirt and slush. So I decided to add a few coats of spar urethane. I actually noticed that it makes a hard layer and almost makes the trim feel like plastic, so I think it's going to do a great job protecting the camper. If you happen to have seen the other video where I installed the power in this camper, you might notice that I'm moving the panels. And you might wonder why. Well, I scouted a few campgrounds and realized that almost anywhere I could get into, the panels would be facing north or be completely shaded. And I think for the best chance of them being useful anywhere I go, the roof is probably my best option. Moving them to the roof wasn't that difficult. I just needed to get some different brackets that were a little bit taller, and I had to put some spacers between those brackets and the panels so that the brackets wouldn't land on top of a rib. They'd land on a nice flat piece of steel and be able to get a good seal.
So I bought these thinking I'd put a board on this for a Coleman stove, but they don't fit. And this is the smallest they have. But I think I can cut this off right here. Basically, what I see is I should be able to cut that off and that off. And if it doesn't fit, then we'll figure something out. But I really want to use these. I think it would be pretty handy. And I may mount a slide out drawer to get the stove a little further out away from the camper. We'll see how it works. Shortened it up quite a bit. Let's see if it fits. Oh my gosh, that's so close. But you know what? If I just fill this space down here with a piece of 2x4 or something like that, that would actually make the stove a little higher and a little more comfortable to work from. I think that's gonna work just fine. Woo. Slides through. So I'm going to need a way to secure this. I think I'm going to put an eye bolt back here and then one down here. So I think I'll cut kind of a half circle out of here so I can run a strap up and over this through an eye bolt and then tighten it down so that can ride right there while we're going on the road. That's the hardest part. These are meant for one piece down the middle of the drawer. When you put 2 of them together, if they're not straight with each other, they really don't like to slide. So it's really important to try to keep them perfectly parallel with one another. I kind of feel like maybe I should drill a couple more holes, run more of them screws into this board. I think I'm going to do that. Nice. There's very little space between these hinges, so it's going to be really hard to screw these in. So what I'm going to do is mark the holes, pre-drill them, and then screw them in with a short screwdriver. Pretty tricky getting a screw in here. All right, let's see how it works. Nice. That's a nice height too. And I like that it keeps the flame away from the battery. Yeah, that should work pretty well. One thing I wanted to do before I left, but ran out of time, was I'd like to make something that hangs down here and then has like a little fold out table. That way I can put stuff on the table, maybe have plates, spatula, cooking spray, spices, stuff like that hanging up here. That way it's a lot easier to cook with. Is that really necessary? This is going to be my table. Not that it's a huge table, but it'll help. Honestly, I never feel like doing trim, but these two ceiling joints are awful. They have to be covered. I might do a little more trim on the edges, but for now I think I'm going to call it good and focus on finishing up my stools. Alright, there's one stool. Perfect. Perfect height. When I built this table, I used my cooler as a reference for height for the stools, and then I put the table to a height that felt good. So I built these stools the same height as the cooler. This stool is bigger than that one. That one will actually fit inside of this one. Let me show you how that works. So this one is the bigger one. It's gonna sit right down in here, and it actually fits really well. Then I can put dry goods different things that I want to haul with me, I can stuff them in the center of this and then just slide this one right down in. Once that's slid down in there, there's no way anything's going to come out of this box and end up floating around in here. So it should work really well for hauling. It's perfect height for my table. I think they're going to work out great. And the last piece of the puzzle is how to store this. So I've got 2 hooks up here. So this hangs from there. It doesn't quite hit my stools. I've got 2 eyelets and I've just got a bungee cord around this. This is the table. So I've got that pretty tight actually. Take the bungee cord off, take my table out, pull this out. And I'll hang it up. Put my table in. That's all ready to rock. Just pop these out, throw them inside. Pop that out. I think it's a pretty awesome setup. Well, I think this is about as far as I'm going to take this project. I might do a few changes here and there as I use it, but for the most part, this is finished. So 2 questions a lot of people asked was how much does it cost to build and how much does it weigh? Now, as far as the cost goes, I'll just break it down into 2 portions. Portion 1, building the camper, the doors, brand new tires, having the wheel bearings packed, the frame, the table, the shelves, the insulation, basically everything that makes this camper a finished product minus the solar. That cost was $3,382. Now I separated the solar cost because a lot of people could probably easily just put an extension cord in here and plug into their campsite, wire their camper up and not have that extra cost. But if you wanted to be able to have power wherever you are, it's really nice to have a solar setup, a good battery, a charge controller, and an inverter. If you wanted to replicate the exact solar kit that I have in this, it costs you $1,038. Now onto the weight, I took this and I weighed it by itself on the scale and it weighed 1,340 pounds. After I did that, I hooked it to the truck, pulled the truck to where it was off of the scale and the camper was still on the scale to see how much tongue weight it had, and it had 180 pounds of tongue weight. And that to me seems really quite well balanced because driving down the road, it's not bouncing you around too bad. It's pretty smooth ride. And then you never get that trailer sway because there's enough weight on the tongue. So all in all, I'm really happy with the way this turned out. Tow's great, comfortable to sleep in, heats well, it's got power. I think this one was a success. Thanks a lot for watching, and we'll be seeing each other really soon.